1. So last week my computer starts crashing. It crashes when I start. It crashes when I do anything, typically within 10 to 15 minutes of powering on. I raise an IT request for it as is protocol. While the request is assigned, I do a few sanity checks on my own, just to be able to gain any additional information which could help them out. I figure that these are not workstation computers for which they have spare parts, and I should probably help them out because I was one of the people who badgered them into getting these machines for us in the first place. Almost immediately I noticed that the CPU isn't being cooled, and I traced it back to a faulty pump in the water cooling setup that we had, or a faulty seal around the pipe that goes to the pump. There was a leak, and all the liquid had evaporated or leaked away and dried. Now I'm no expert on water cooling for PCs by any stretch, but it was quite clear that nothing was being cooled. So when the IT guy came by, I told him it was probably something to do with the water cooling pump, as the CPU is running really hot. IT guy tells me that I shouldn't have been poking in there myself, but he appreciates the help nonetheless. He takes the computer and passes it off to his dumbass boss, DB from now, the person who checks faulty hardware before making a decision. DB is livid. He tells the first guy what I told him is meaningless, and to let the professionals handle it. Okay. DB comes to the same conclusion about the pump himself after wasting a day. It's after this that it all gets really weird. So to ensure that I could continue my work, I get another computer assigned to me. It's one of the normal workstation PCs that they have. But I'm not really complaining, I get how it is. I start raising IT requests for software installation so that I can at least have everything that I know works on these machines, and get some work done. Some of the software works, and I'm able to continue my work, even though it's in a very limited capacity. 2 days pass like this, and I never heard back from IT about my computer. I asked DB about any progress, and he informs me that they themselves didn't have any water cooling parts in the office, so they had to go to the vendor they bought the computer from for it. And that the vendor said it would take 3 to 4 weeks to procure said part. I was speechless. It's just a dumb water cooler. Even if they had to find a replacement, surely they could find a compatible replacement within days. At that moment, I thought maybe DB had asked for the exact model and make of the part, which may or may not be available, since these things go in and out of stock all the time. What followed was this exchange. We don't need the exact same model if that's what you've asked the vendor for. Anything compatible with the CPU should work, and we could probably get a new one faster.
Who's the technician here? Don't lecture me about compatibility. This isn't your personal computer, it's company property.
The guy says 1 month. I can't not work for 1 month.
We haven't closed your request. Go back and log your project time with the request ID. Leave the actual diagnostics and repairs to the actual technicians.
Needless to say, I was pretty pissed at that, but I decided to follow his instructions to the letter. I have since started logging my time as system down with the request ID for my original ticket. I come into work, do what I can on this replacement computer, and I chill for the rest of the day. This is going to raise a lot of eyebrows when IT requests are tallied at the end of the month, and I'm looking forward to it. Till then, it's been 1 week, and I'm looking forward to 2 or 3 more of these, at least till DB decides to at least give my suggestions some thought and not chase after the exact same part. Update. The first choke point in the workflow is here. There is a client review on Friday, and usually we can get multiple reviews going on my colleagues' computers and mine. But it just so happens that my colleague has a different project assigned to him, and since my computer is unavailable, they've had to agree to outfit an older workstation with Windows 10, all Oculus drivers, etc., all in one day, to be able to still host the client at our office. Update 2. They were not able to get the computer ready in time on Friday. I have to leave early due to a personal emergency, so I missed the actual fallout. Still logged in my 4 hours as system down, talked to the IT guy who helped me out with the tickets and following up with the entire ordeal. And according to him, they are supposed to come up with a solution by Friday. My computer still isn't here yet, so I guess the solution is to wait. 2. Many moons ago, back when smartphones didn't exist yet, I managed a major fast food restaurant in Florida. As many of you know, Florida is where you go to visit if you want to be eaten alive by bugs, alligators, snakes, etc. So in addition to doing basic managerial tasks at my store, I've also been known to help out with the odd pest problems like throwing venomous spiders outside and removing snakes from the premises, but nothing too insane. Well, one day my bosses sold all of their restaurants to a man who we'll call IB, Idiot Boss. I rarely saw him because he was a very hands-off kind of boss, and I generally liked him because he didn't enforce a bunch of ridiculous rules like my previous bosses did. And he understood that I knew how to run that store. If I ever needed anything, I would just call him to let him know, and he would usually just tell one of the workers from a sister store to go help me with whatever I needed help with. He avoided going to his stores like the plague. But one day, out of the blue, he showed up. Normally he'd only stop by after midnight once the store was closed, and he only did that about once a week. He was just there to deal with some paperwork that he didn't get around to doing the night before. No big deal. And I was helping a customer that had just walked in. My sweet customer informed me that he had seen a flying ant on our front door when he walked in. I thanked him for letting me know, and told him that I'd look into it. After I got done helping my customer, I went to go check out the ant. But there were now 2 flying ants on the outside of the door. Uh-oh. That's how swarms always start. 1 is fine, it might go away. 2 is bad because the first one liked the door so much that it told its buddy about it. So I went back inside and told IB to call pest control because there were 2 out there. And there were about to be a lot more. IB laughed because I was scared of some ants outside. He thought I wasn't afraid of anything, and it's true. I'm not afraid of some flying ants. I know they can fly, and I know they can bite. But I don't like being dismissed like that. I don't needlessly tell people to do things. I told him again that he needed to call pest control, and he told me not to worry about it as long as they weren't inside. Cue malicious compliance. On his way out the door, he made a point to tease me again because there were only 4 out there. I laughed politely and waved goodbye to him. Over the next few days, more and more flying ants showed up. They really liked that door for some reason. It got to the point there were a good few hundred on it. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, I wasn't worried about them because, like IB said, they weren't inside the store. Once it hit around day 4 of the swarm, customers almost completely stopped coming in, with the exception of some brave lawn care guys, and a pest control guy who left me his card. My customers didn't want to get bitten, and I didn't blame them. Then on day 5, manager from one of the sister stores popped in to grab some food that their store had run out of. She was stunned by how many ants there were. I shrugged, and told her that I told IB already. But she still decided to call him, and she told me that there were now hundreds of flying ants. I don't know exactly what he said to her, but I do remember that after that phone call, she pointed out that he never listens to the female managers. I think she may have been right about that, but that's a story for another day. I said goodbye to her as she exited through the back door, and she told me to enjoy doing nothing for the rest of my shift. Eventually the boss came back to the store for his once-a-week visit, which was in the middle of the night because that was normal for him. And he must have had a conniption because he called me as soon as I walked into the store that following morning. He was so mad, but not at me. He went on a huge rant about how there must be something wrong with Florida, and how he lost so much money due to customers not coming in. He asked me if I'd be okay working half a day, and I said sure. He called pest control and they solved the problem the next day. He also got more hands-on with the stores after that, and listened to me a little better, which was nice. 3. Zitri here. I'm an senior developer. This story is from the times when I climbed the ladder to become a senior for the first time in the energy industry in my country. Summer was coming. Despite my several attempts to delay a GIS, Geographical Information Systems, roughly mapping the assets and values for other integrations project, my project manager decided it was the best time to collect data in the most rainy season in a rural area. The upper management was on the move, seeking a head for the chopping block to pay for the inefficiency of the project and the money lost for nearly useless data. You can't ask for efficiency from a worker when he's under heavy rain with a thick layer of mud on the ground and GPS spewing nonsense. What can I say? I had warned them. I was a hard-working developer. I loved to code. I'd often do overtime without asking for anything in return, training myself about the new technologies and do everything within my power to ease the job of the field crew. You know, the best candidate to be blamed. It all started when I started to take my annual leave for an early holiday near the sea. A well-respected comrade from another branch called me and asked for a rush job about a detailed data migration. I reached the people at the branch, spoke to the management, promised I'd do whatever is possible, and spent nearly 40 hours non-stop in front of the computer at home, finishing the migration. When I got back from the holiday, surprise! My project manager wanted to speak to me. He asked me where I was for the last 2 days before my holiday. It was weird, because he was CC'd the mail exchange and he actually knew. I told him I had worked on the migration non-stop. He was having none of it. Work had to be done at the workplace. Company lawyer got called. I got asked for a statement about my absence. I can't tell you how pissed I was. I clearly mentioned it was company policy allowing coders working from home in emergencies. The VPN records and the job done easily showed I did more work than I was supposed to during those 2 days. The response to my statement was a new rule, disallowing coders from working anywhere but at the office during usual office hours. I calmly headed to the HR, told them I was taking back my permission to be assigned overtime at all. In my country's laws, a written permission of the worker must be taken before he can be assigned overtime legally. When asked about the reason, I told what happened and said I would never even work a minute outside my hours again. I also started taking much more care about the breaks and started using every single second of them. Off the record, demoralized as I was, I didn't give my 100% to the job anyway. I also dusted off my CV and started looking for a new job. Thankfully, this was a right decision by me. In my contract, I had agreed to traveling for business reasons. I also had a 4-year-old daughter, another 6-month-old daughter, and we had started living in that city for that job, so we didn't have familiar folks to look after my wife. My project manager's next step was assigning me to a meter replacement project in another city. This was bull droppings. Anything that required coding I could easily do from where I was, and my responsibilities in the main branch sometimes required me to be physically there, especially meetings. When I asked for how long I was assigned there, the project manager grinned like the idiot he is and said, "For the time being." 2 people can play the game of contracts and laws. Our labor laws clearly indicate if a worker is assigned a job outside his city, the weekly commute should be done during office hours. So I got even happier when I learned that the project manager decided, because the job isn't urgent, I was supposed to go by train or bus, not an aeroplane. First week I got the train at 9 AM, managing to get to the branch office by roughly 4:30 PM. Day done? Day done! On Friday I left the office roughly at 10:30 AM, so if they want me to work only 3 days a week, who am I to refuse? I should confess I started working at roughly 10% of my capacity during that week. I was getting very nice responses from the defense sector in my country, and I was confident I could land a job a few days after I got fired. The project manager simply couldn't back down and assign me back to the main branch, so I spent 3 weeks in another city working roughly 3 days a week. During that time, our labor laws clearly declare that one worker can't be singled out about break times if people of the same level are in similar behavior. Because a senior developer there simply didn't care about breaks and clock in and out times, I followed his example. He was untouchable with good connections to the upper management. They couldn't punish him, so they couldn't punish me. I remember once having a nearly 5-hour lunch break with him to eat fish in a fancy restaurant, with the view of Bosphorus. That senior developer was also a very heavy smoker and coffee addict. Once an hour he'd call me outside to accompany him to have coffee and to smoke. Later he said he was supposed to look over my shoulder and check my job. He couldn't care less. He'd instead sit in my room for hours at a time speaking about times past, our families, office gossip, anything but the job itself. I was kindly asked to quit. But it was past my 2nd year in that company. That meant that they were supposed to pay me roughly 3 months' pay as severance, then roughly another 2 months as notice if they wanted to fire me instantly. There was absolutely no recording in that meeting, so I calmly explained I'd keep on my 3-day relaxed weekly shifts until they fired me. During my 4th week, I was called to the project manager's room and got fired with my severance and penalty for the notice. 15 minutes after I left the office, I accepted my new job. The project in the branch office got completed successfully, mostly because there was no need for a developer there at all. The project manager didn't get fired, he just got demoted to engineer. I don't know what happened then. The company is still alive and well, so I believe the upper management revised their policies. Hopefully I never have to mess with such a manager again in my life. 4. Way back in the early 2000s, I worked at a Blockbuster Videos in the UK. It wasn't my first job, but I was still in high school when I started, so it was near as damn it. I had a pretty good working relationship with my boss and quickly moved up the ranks to one of the deputy managers. I was the person the manager would call to cover shifts, and honestly, unless I had a really good reason, I always did the extra because I actually really liked the job. I'm a film nerd, so I loved spending my working days talking to customers about movies. It also didn't hurt that I could rent any movie at any time for free. So this one particular Saturday we were slammed. 3 staff members called in sick. We had a big new release movie that week, and we had a big computer game release on the Friday too, so it was manic. Halfway through my shift, a guy comes in and says he bought a game the week before from the store and that he wanted a refund. He said I had served him, but I hadn't given him a receipt. Now, I did remember serving the guy, but couldn't remember what he bought, and frankly, even though it's automatic to give receipts, I couldn't guarantee I had. The problem was that specific game was the only copy we apparently had. Our inventory said it was in store, but this guy had it, so somehow it had left the store without being processed. Either it had been stolen by this guy, it was some kind of error on my part, or I had actively given it to him and pocketed the money. To be clear, these are options from an objective POV. I never stole from that job, so I definitely didn't do the last. My manager was working with me, so he refunded the guy, took the game back, and then, for the rest of the shift, didn't speak to me once. As we closed the store that night, the manager took me into the office and proceeded to accuse me of stealing. Without evidence, he said that I stole the game and pocketed the money. I obviously denied the claim. Things got heated, and it ended with him telling me to hand in my notice. 2 weeks, so I did. I was heartbroken because I loved the job and I knew I was innocent. I may have given it by accident, but I would never knowingly steal. So 2 weeks later, my notice period is up, and on my last shift, coincidentally, the area manager comes in. Now, I had quite a good relationship with the AM. I'd been hired by them originally, and it was frequently noted by them that I always seemed to be on shift when they came in. They asked me how I was, and they said that I was sad that I was leaving. They didn't know this, so asked why. I explained the situation and they immediately went to the office. Half an hour later, I got a call to go to the office. The AM was sat with the CCTV footage for the day the man said he'd bought the game. In the video, it showed me serving him, then as he left, he had a chat with the store manager. No sound on the CCTV, but they were clearly chatting. The manager was working in new inventory, ready to put out on the shelf. For some reason, the manager turned his back on the customer for a few moments, and as plain as day, the customer reached over the counter, grabbed something, and left. The AM assumed this was the game. Well, the manager was called in. He was first asked why I had given in my notice, when the accusation against me deserved a meeting with the AM, and my immediate dismissal if I was guilty. The manager just stuttered something about not wanting to make a big deal. Then the AM asked the manager to explain what happened in the CCTV after showing it. The manager just sat there quietly. Well, anyway, the AM asked me at this point to rescind my notice, which I did, though I cannily asked for a few days extra paid holiday because I felt embarrassed by the theft situation, and the AM agreed. The AM then said they would be taking the month's worth of CCTV footage to have it looked over, because this act of negligence by the manager was a cause for concern. The blood ran from the manager's face at this point, but nothing further was said. I finished my shift and walked out with the AM to enjoy my week off. 3 days later, I got a phone call from the AM asking if I could meet with him at the store that day. I obliged. When I arrived, the AM took me to the office and told me there had been a situation. During the CCTV checks, it had become apparent that the manager had been using the store for other reasons. On a number of nights over the course of a month, he'd closed the store, then after the staff had gone, he'd invited people in. One night he'd held a poker game in the staff room. Later found out he'd been using the money from the tills to cover his losses and putting through refund notices to cover it. And on 3 other occasions, he was seen bringing in women to have sex within his office. Now, the women were known prostitutes in the area. The manager was also married. Well, the manager was automatically suspended while there was an investigation, and the reason I was brought in was to be asked to run the store in his absence. After the investigation was complete, it turned out the manager had been giving hundreds of pounds of refunds per month, and falsifying who gave the refunds so it didn't look suspicious. This had gone on for years in multiple stores that he'd worked in. So, because he accused me of something I didn't do, he lost his job. And his marriage. His wife obviously wasn't impressed by the prostitutes. And I got a promotion with a lovely raise. 5. I'm not exactly proud of this because I can kind of see where the customer came from. But I think those of you who have dealt with condescending customers before can appreciate it for what it was. So I supervised a mom-and-pop restaurant for several years that dealt specifically with shrimp and fish. Outside of cleaning and prepping the stuff, the main deal was cooking it in several big ol' fryers. It involved work, but it's not hard work. Just stick the basket of food in the fryer and set a timer for 3 minutes. And when it comes out, just bag it up and give it to the customer. Easy work. Though it gets a bit complicated on, let's say, a busy day like Friday, where we do anywhere between $1,000 to $1,300 during a 6-hour shift. Or maybe $1,500 to $1,700, if it was really busy. See, that's a normal busy Friday. When it's Lent season, business would boom significantly. Like we do 5,000 to 7,000 during the Friday shifts, so yeah, busy. When it's that busy, you can't exactly rely on timers as much, because there's so much food going in and out of the fryers the temperature fluctuates, so you gotta eyeball it. I'll have food burning at 2.5 minutes, or some food taking up to 4 minutes to look right. So here's where the malicious compliance comes in. During a Lent Friday night dinner rush, we'll get hundreds of people coming into a shop that's probably smaller than a middle-class living room. I'm talking like the waiting area on the other side of the counter was probably 20 feet by 7 feet, so it can get pretty cramped. I have my register person taking orders and making bags, and pushing them along the line, while my weigh table people can weigh out the food so I can start cooking them. When the order is done, I shove it in a bag and yell the name of the order, and someone in the crowd will grab it and be on their way. It's a very intimate setup. So I got a counter full of about 20 plus bags, each bag with a different order, and this one bag gets to me, and it said, "Cook shrimp an extra minute," or something to that effect. Now, like I said, the fryers cook funny when there's that much food going in and out, so using my years of shrimp frying experience, I extrapolate in my head what the food should look like if cooked for that long under normal conditions, and cook it until it looks like that. I pull up the food and hear an from behind me, and I look. And this lady apparently followed her bag down the line, waited for me to drop the food, and set her own timer. She said with a shitty gotcha attitude while looking at her own timer,
"Yeah, you need to cook that for an extra 45 seconds.
At this point her food was already looking too done, but she interrupted my flow and gave me an attitude, so I blurted out, "Oh, okay," and set a timer for 45 seconds and put it on the counter. I bagged some other people's food, and I hear the lady behind me again, apparently with a little less teeth to her words this time.
I think it's done now."
And I grabbed my timer that I had set right in front of her, looked at it, and yelled with an equally condescending gotcha attitude, "Oh, but you still have 17 seconds left!" and smacked it down and waited until the timer went off. 17 seconds can feel like a long time in those kinds of situations. Finally, the timer went off, I grabbed her food, it looked burnt. I bagged it up and gave it to her and said, "Here you go, miss, enjoy the rest of your day." She muttered a thank you and walked off. and my co-workers and customers had a little laugh about it. Never got a complaint. Now don't get me wrong, I get it. As a customer I can be finicky sometimes too. But the problem was I was honouring her request, but in a way she didn't understand because there's a bunch of variables at play that only an experienced fryer cook would get. I feel bad, but at the same time, I don't appreciate anyone giving me an attitude, and I've never been a customer who's always right kind of person anyways. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, number 24. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Update for anyone who's wondering on the fish tank situation. Got the fish tank. I had a very productive weekend. For someone who's not feeling well, I did a lot this weekend. It must be a sign I'm getting better. I certainly don't feel as bad. And so got the grass cut on Sunday, which I've been putting off. I got that done, and then I was like, you know what, I'm going to clean that fish tank out. And I did. So I got all the old stuff out, all the old gravel and everything, and trees. I chucked everything, the heater, the pump, everything. It's been sitting so long, I wasn't really confident reusing anything. So that all got taken out and thrown into the trash, and got cleaned out. The seals in it look to be intact, but I think I'm going to need to fill it up anyway, test fill it. I can't really take it outside and do it and leave it for a while, because it probably get broke. So I'll just have to test fill it and keep an eye on it. But it should be alright. I think it'll be okay. And if it is, then I can get the environment properly set up, because I've got everything I need to go in it. I might need some more artificial plants, but I think I've got most of what I need. And, of course, the most important thing is then to find a pet shop that sells fish, because I can think of one pet shop in my local town, and it doesn't sell fish. I'm not sure what they sell, but they don't sell fish. I popped in Saturday while I was out, and they had no fish. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.